So our chapter 4 is about drafting and revising. A lot of times when we think about drafting and revising, this is what most people hate about writing. If this is the thing you hate about writing, I promise I completely understand your grapple with writing. When we think about drafts, you may think about them in terms of your paper being completed, but actually your draft begins the moment you write something on your paper. So keep that in mind. It is not something where you have to have everything correct. It is not the type of paper where you have all of your sentence structure correct. It is not any of that, okay? Your draft simply begin with you getting your ideas on the paper. Okay? So when you start brainstorming, technically that's you starting your draft because you're simply getting your ideas on the paper. So keep that in mind. Don't stress about it. We're going to actually talk about that when we start to do revisions, because revisions and edits and all of that are a little bit different. And we're going to tell you the difference, because a lot of people think that revisions and edits are the same. They are not. We target different things throughout. Okay. So one thing when you are drafting, it is important that you get your ideas on paper. And another thing that you should do is take regular breaks when you are writing. Now, this will require you not to procrastinate. If you know your first draft of your paper is due in 2 weeks and you decide to start the day before, you're not going to be able to take as many breaks. So try not to procrastinate. Try to make sure that you give yourself enough time. That way you're not as overwhelmed. You're not feeling as stressed. But when you are drafting, the things that you should not be concerned about are the following. Do not worry about grammar. Do not worry about punctuation so much. Okay, make sure you put some punctuation in there and don't make it like text messages unless you are actually writing your narrative in text message form. Then that's fine, because you can do that. But make sure that you are thinking about it. Just don't worry so much of whether or not it's correct. Okay, do not worry about sentence structure. Do not worry about subject verb agreement. Do not worry about any of those things as you are completing your draft. I simply just want you to write as much or as many of your ideas down. If it feels like you are getting off topic, or it feels like you have different things going on in that paper, that is okay. Just simply get all of your information out. Okay? That is the most important thing when you are drafting. Of course, we'll have different drafts. You'll have first, second, third, or fourth. It just depends on how much you want to work on within your drafts. But definitely for your first drafts, do not worry about any of these things. And I know this may be different because these are the things we probably worry about the most when we are writing, but I don't want you to worry about those so much. It's much more important that you get your ideas out and that we figure out how to get your ideas into full coherent thoughts. Okay? Now, drafts differ from revisions in a couple of ways. Okay? That's one thing to note. Your draft, your revisions only start after you feel like your paper is complete in terms of thoughts. Okay? Outside of that, it is still a draft. Once you feel like you have everything down that you want to incorporate in your paper, that's when you start your revision. Okay? Now, one thing about a revision that you have to do, let me see if it's going right. If not, we'll put it here. Trace the body. Okay. With your revisions, there are a couple things you need to do. In between your draft and your revision, you need to make sure that you take a break in between. This is important. This can be a short amount of time. It can be as short as 2 days, but you need to make sure that you take your time away from it. If you are like me, one of my errors that I know that I make when I'm writing, if I am reading my own paper, I tend to read things that are not there simply because I know my thoughts and what I thought I put there. And so that's part of the reason why you need to give yourself a break or a cooling off period. That way you can set it aside, you can kind of forget about those things and then come back to them. Another thing you need to do, if possible, this one's a little tricky and sometimes hard to revise on a hard copy. If it's possible, it is best to revise on a hard copy and make sure that you have a colored pen, not black or red, something other than those two colors, so that you can see the different changes you are making in your paper. If you do it on a computer, you're just simply inserting things. You don't really notice the differences in between the two. But if you are completing this assignment with a hard copy, you'll have a better idea of how your paper and your information is evolving and how things are changing for you, how those thoughts that you initially had, how they are coming together, things of that nature. Another thing you need to do with your reading your writing that we don't probably think about is read the paper aloud. This is actually very, very important. If you read it out loud, you'll notice the choppiness, you'll notice if something is missing, you'll notice if it sounds better in one place and not in the other, you'll notice the sentence structure, where you pause for commas, all those things. You will notice all of those different things within your paper if you read it out loud with self-review. Of course, we're going to have comments and review from me. For your narrative, I don't believe I put peer review for this one. I think it's simply self-review and my review, but I'll make sure. There will be a point where we help each other, and so with that, we have to make sure that we're aware of those different things. And so to help others, we have to know how to help ourselves. So reading out loud and reading those things to see what the issues are is very, very, very important. Now, when I give feedback, take advantage of it. That's so important simply because when I am giving feedback, a lot of times people turn in the exact same essay, although I've given all kinds of comments. And if you're going to do that, that's fine. Just tell me don't waste my time, and you're just going to take whatever grade you get. I promise I'm okay with that. So keep those things in mind when you get feedback, whether it's from me or from your peers. If we are sitting and taking our time to look at it, we're going to make sure that you have the opportunity to improve it. And not only that, you have some great tutors that are available to help you, and I will make sure they are available and give you their information. We also have, I know they're in the writing center, and then we have those tutors. But as I said, we'll also have peer review at one point and outside of myself. So you will have tons and tons of opportunities to get the help that you need. So please take advantage, ask questions, figure out what you need to fix with your papers. This next point is also important. Do not get overwhelmed. Sometimes when we're trying to fix our papers, we're so focused on making things perfect, and that is not the point of our revisions. Our point is to make sure that we focus on the issues that we may have in the paper without becoming stressed. Okay? And so one way to do that is to revise in stages. And so how you revise in stages is simply plan out your schedule. If you are writing and you decide it's time to revise, course, give yourself a day or two off. And then on your third day, you can just focus on your introduction. On the fourth day, you can focus on your first 2 body paragraphs. On that fifth day, you can focus on your fifth and sixth body paragraphs. You can continue without however many body paragraphs. You can do it that way. Or you can focus on several major elements. And what I mean by elements is, if you're like me, like I said, you're missing big words, or you're missing certain things out of your thing, you can do that. You can focus on your sentence structure at one point. You can focus on those different things that you feel are missing. And technically, when you're revising, you're also focusing on your thoughts. So if you feel like something that you've written isn't clear, or if you're writing some kind of quote, you need to make sure that the person understands the dialogue between those two people. If you need to give some more background, or you need to put in vivid details, or you need to do a flashback or flash forward to make it more interesting. Those are the type of things that you need to think about when you are creating the paper, especially the narrative in particular. Okay. Another good thing to do is, depending on the paper and depending on how you decide writing is best for you, you can revise with an outline. If you create outlines, then you have an idea of what the points you want to make. And so with your outline, as I said, you're going to think about the arguments and things you're presenting, your evidence. You need to make sure that when you think about those evidence that you're presenting, that you have different kinds. Of course, you can always put your experience, but we need to put different things in to convince our reader. Sometimes readers connect better when we're telling them our story, but not everybody buys our stories. We can give them facts to go along with our stories. We can also give some other people's testimonies. We can do a multitude of things to make it more convincing. So once you revise and you decide you want to revise with the outline, you can think about those points that you put in certain places and see that you actually use those points. And if you realize some points you put on there that you didn't use, or they seem weak, or they need to go in a different place, that's the time to change them around. Also, I know I said I want to give comments, but we can also have it where we have conferences regarding your papers, and the comments that I give if something isn't clear, or you want to you have more questions and things like that. So we can have those options if that makes you more comfortable. As I said, you have tutors, and of course we'll do some peer-to-peer conferences for our revisions.